Welcome everyone to another session of Lessons Learned. My name is Obed Figueroa, and I have the privilege today to introduce you to another practicing physician. So let me introduce her. Dr. Deneen Hendrick began her college education at Johns Hopkins University at Baltimore, Maryland, earning a bachelor's in natural sciences. She then went on to enroll at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, also known as PCOM, where she earned a doctorate in osteopathic medicine. She then went on to complete a pediatric residency at the Nemore AI DuPont Hospital for Children in Wilmington, Delaware. Dr. Hendrick actively provided care in several community-based and private practice settings in Pennsylvania and Delaware and several other states. In addition, Dr. Hendrick has experience working in clinical, academic, and administrative settings in medical education. And if there were any more hours in the day, she also extends herself to a number of organizations where she mentors pre-med students and actively participates in council meetings, making an impact within the industry. So, Dr. Hendrick, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. To share our intention with this platform, what we're doing is we're connecting with science majors, pre-med students who just enjoy listening and learning about you and your walk. You know, there's a perception for one that has achieved what you have achieved, that you've always been perfect. There's no blemishes. There's no hard walk that you faced or challenged, right? You had to be this gifted person. And yes, you very well are. However, you know, even those that are gifted have challenges. And so we're going to take a dive. We will take a dive into that. But before we go there, what I'd like to do is to start with something a little fun, which I call speed questions.
Okay.
And we're just going to fly through them and just give me your first reaction.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. First, let me say thank you for inviting me and having me. And hopefully, sometimes speed questions are hard, so hopefully I can answer.
You'll do fine. And thank you again. So PC or Mac?
Well, I'll say Mac.
Android, iPhone.
Android.
Favorite season?
Fall.
Okay. Favorite vacation spot?
Caribbean, probably Jamaica, but I'll say anywhere in the Caribbean. But
Okay.
if I have to pick a place, Jamaica.
Favorite restaurant?
Oh, don't really have one.
Okay. All right. Favorite food?
Don't have one of those either.
Oh, food or dessert that you eat, and is there a food or dessert that you eat, and when after you eat it, you just feel guilty, like, oh, I had too much of that?
Well, only because I had some the other day. I will say peach cobbler. Friends made it, and it was spectacular.
Favorite movie that you really enjoy?
I'm an old Turner Classic movie fan, and I like a lot of movies, but off the top of my head, it's called Imitation of Life.
Ah, okay,
It's an old movie.
cool. Is there a favorite music genre that you have, that you like, excuse me?
Um, I like a lot, I'll say it's a toss up probably between gospel and old school hip hop, not some of this stuff out here now. So when I say old school, I mean like PE, Public Enemy. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I'm a big PE, Eric B and Rakim,
Oh, wow.
that kind
Know
of.
that. Okay. A favorite book? Do you have-
Oh, The Blacker the Berry, The Sweeter the Juice. I think that was the name of it. Was it Blacker the Berry, The Sweeter the Juice? Yeah, I think that was the name
Remember the
of
author?
it. Hazlitt. Yeah, I think it was The Sweeter the Juice. I said The Blacker the Berry, but I think it was called The Sweeter the Juice.
Okay. Favorite car?
One that runs and gets me from point A to point B. I keep my cars a long time, so I currently am in the Toyota family, and it has served me well. So I will say anything in that family, but only because that is the cars that I've had the last 30 years,
Gotcha.
and I've kept them 15. I kept one 15 years, and this other one is about 10 or 12. So.
Now, when you think about your education experience at the primary level, do you have a favorite teacher, you know, that you know you think of fondly at high school?
Yeah. You said beyond high school or before high school?
During high school.
Oh, during high school. Well, I'll even go back to elementary school. I was privileged and fortunate enough. My parents moved from the South to Bergen County, New Jersey, North Jersey, as I like to say, the real North Jersey, and the school system, public school system. So Miss Judge, Miss Kilpatrick, those were some of my elementary school teachers. And then Miss Sumner was a high school teacher. I liked school. Miss Cheryl Miller, she was our dance instructor and our health coach, health teacher, our assistant principal. So my experience in education as a young person was very, very good. And I think that I thank God for parents that stressed reading. And so I liked school. I was one of the kind of, people probably thought I was nerdy, and I probably was, but I was a good nerd. But I liked school. I liked school a lot. I liked learning. I still like learning, and I hope that passion never goes away. And like I said, I enjoyed school, so I don't think I had any teachers that I didn't like. I think I looked at everyone as they have an area of expertise and I'm trying to learn. So I went into that situation. But yeah, hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so let's take that dive. Well, you'll walk us through. I'll guide you. If we were to, I'm curious, but when you started to think about going into the sciences, when did that begin?
I don't have a recollection where I didn't want to do it. I don't know that I liked school, but I wasn't just a science person. Sometimes people are just, they're heavy science. I actually liked a lot of subjects. And if you ask me what my favorite subject was, it actually was not science. I actually love English. I am an officer in my sorority chapter, and so I write meditations, and someone read the one I just posted and they said, you're an excellent writer. So I actually loved English and took a lot of English courses. So humanities were really big for me, languages. I did like science, but I don't know that I was necessarily a science, like, ooh, like, like I want to see, I take things apart or see how things work. So I sort of am probably brought more of the humanitarian side. I was a gifted and a smart student. I think I was a little, if I'm honest, I was a little too focused. And
so in terms of preparing to apply for undergrad, were you leading that? Did you get help with that? Tell me about that experience.
So my school, very good. I grew up in Bergen County, and we had one high school, 2 junior high schools, 6 elementary schools. So it was very, but the school system was excellent. And everybody, unless you went to a religious school or you went to a trade school, each of the counties had a trade school for vocations, cosmetology. So unless you went to one of those schools, or as I said, a religious school, everybody pretty much went to the public schools. So the guidance counselors were good. And if you had potential, anybody, you were encouraged to apply. And so I was never, I knew I was going to apply to some schools. Now, I probably limited myself because, as I said, I was very shy. And I knew I was going to school, but I did not want to be too far away from my beloved mother and father.
Okay, so you get into undergrad. Did you right away know what your major was, or you?
Again, by default, I picked a science major. If I had it to do again, and I tell pre-meds this, I have a very dear friend who's a couple of years ahead of me in medical school. She was a philosophy major in college. And so you can really major, in anything. And if you have another I took the science major. I probably should have added a public health minor. But I didn't. So that's why I said, now I would do that. But back then, I think I was just so intent on, okay, here you are, don't add anything extra. And, I don't know if it was, I don't want to say it was fear, but, sometimes you get in a space and you just stay there and you
Mhm.
just kind of like, do I really want to branch out? I told you I loved English. I loved writing. So if I had it to go back, I might do it differently. I may not have picked a science major, or I might have picked a science major and added a doable minor. So it's always hard because you have to split the difference of, and now there's so many prerequisites. Back when I was applying, I don't think we had some of the prerequisites you have now, but you
Mhm.
have to balance getting all your prerequisites and satisfying the major. Now, I tell pre-meds all the time, if you have to pick, you want to focus on the major, because the goal, medical school is secondary. Your goal is to get a 4-year degree.
Mhm.
So you got to be thinking about making sure you can satisfy those requirements. And that's why obviously picking a science major makes sense, because that gives you the most opportunity to do it and to do it in the right time frame.
Mhm.
But if you said, I told you I have a friend who's a philosophy major.
Right.
So she was able to balance what she needed for the philosophy major and get the prerequisites. Now, again, 30 years ago, they were probably not. Now you've got, all of these extra things that schools, and you got to do research, and you're adding all of this to the pot.
Mhm.
So you really have to decide for yourself what's more important. Take the major that you're passionate about, that you're going to enjoy, that you're going to do well, and that's going to help you develop that other side.
Mhm.
There's a lot of smart science people, but as we've seen from COVID, there are healthcare people that are lacking in the other key areas, what the AAMC calls competencies.
Mhm.
Some people inherently have it. Some people are born
Right.
with the people skill.
When you were going into the undergrad,
Mhm.
how did, tell me about your thinking, and how did you manage, um, the activities that you were doing within that space? I'm curious about your thinking, your experience within that space.
Yeah, I picked, like I said, pretty much was straightforward. I came out of high school, got into Johns Hopkins, which is a very, very intense place. And if you go to a very intense undergraduate experience, it sometimes does, especially if you're coming out of high school as a really good, top student. So I just kind of was of the mindset of, I have to come in. I know I'm capable. There are schools, and especially, now we have a lot more focus on student well-being. But not some schools back in the day, you really had to figure some things out on your own. And so I thank God for the tribe of friends that I found, who
Gotcha.
were really cool, really smart kids from New York and Maryland and all over the country, but we were there trying to help and support each other. So it was pretty much for me, you're capable, you can do this. Again, I was not one of these, ooh, yay, science. I knew I was smart. I did like chemistry. I apologize to anybody who's a physicist. I could not stomach physics. I got through it. I passed. And sometimes you realize things are really about how the subject matter is taught. So it wasn't the physics itself. Sometimes it's just the niche of how it's taught. But I tell students, those are the hurdles you have to get over. So,
Yeah.
I knew, and then I applied and took the MCAT, and I just followed the things. And then I interspersed activities and things that, again, would enhance me as a person as things became available to me. So it's like anything else. You just have to balance and say, is this something I'm passionate about? Community service, a lot of the groups I was part of were things that were going to enhance my ability to be, because I knew I was going into community to be a pediatrician in the community. So
So let me ask you, so
mhm,
in that undergrad space, during that time, that era,
mhm.
were you one of a few? Were you the only most often?
So at Hopkins, they had these huge intro classes. And so again, as you pick a college, now the college, Hopkins itself is not all that big, at least the time I was there, but because it was geared to the sciences and people who were interested in medicine. And so those big introductory classes are what were called the weed out classes. So, you start with 5,000 people and you weed them out. So sometimes you just have to give yourself credit that you actually made it past the weed out and so when I think back on it, sometimes even when I'm thinking, maybe I didn't do so well, I'm like, no, you survived and you got through. So I tell students, you have to think about when you're picking a college, what is it that you need? Some people don't need those big weed out classes. And so a lot of times that comes. Some people thrive in a much smaller where there's more one-on-one. And so those are the types of things you want to ask yourself. Same thing about larger schools. So I'll say like a Penn State or Ohio State, where there's 30,000 people, you have to ask yourself, how do I thrive? So we had, again, it's a smaller school. The Black population is much better now, but obviously at that time, there weren't a lot of us, but you come together and you bond and you look for people that are going to help and support you. The other thing is Hopkins is a school known for turning out pre-meds and doctors, but many of my classmates and my friends came as pre-meds and then figured out this is not for me.
Okay.
And I'm always amazed when I sit and talk to young people. One of the first things I tell them is, you can change your mind. And it's amazing to me. They look at me with really big eyes, like no one has ever told them that. Mm-hmm. So I would hope that if you get to college, let's just say it's a lot to ask a 17-year-old to have your whole life figured out. So let's just say you get to college and you spend a year and you determine it's not for you. I delivered a lot of students from there, whatever, because they would sit in my office and I would say, you can change your mind. So it's just amazing to me that people will say, well, I told people I was going to do this and now I'm really not enjoying it, but I'm just going to go down in flames because I said it. Sometimes you don't know that you don't like it until you get there. And it's not even you don't like it. Maybe you just discover that you're more passionate about something else. So that's, I think, where we do a disservice to young people. So one of the first things I do is free them and say, you can change your mind at any point in time. And preferably before you do all of that to apply to medical school, you figure it out and That's why all of this rushing to apply, I don't co-sign, because you're better off to take that extra time to really be clear that this is what I want to do. And I was at that point that, as each new thing, but again, I have other wonderfully intelligent, smart friends who've had great lives. I mean, doing phenomenal things, but decided that pre-med was not for them, not because they weren't smart enough. So we have to dispel that myth. There are a lot of people who are smart enough to go to medical school, but who will not. I had a person who's a PhD of the programs I was teaching at. He said, Deneen, I don't like people. Now this person is brilliant, but they were smart enough to understand I can do the work, but I don't like people like that. So why would you go into a service-oriented, people-oriented field? And as I tell my undergrads or my med students, you can't even get along with the people here in your class. How are you going to go take care of a stranger? So ask yourself, if the people around you in your class get on your nerves, how are you going to take care of a perfect stranger who now has some medical illness issue? How are you going to do it?
Yeah.
So we don't talk about that. So we have to disconnect intellect. Everybody brings something to the party. Everybody doesn't bring the same thing to the party.
Right.
So if we understand that, then you don't get caught up. Yes, I'm an intelligent and smart woman, but so is everybody else. So then it doesn't become this thing of, oh, and I'm passionate about this because I think some people do the medical school thing to prove a point about intellect. Here's the problem with that. In this world, somebody dies for you trying to prove a point. So this is not the point to prove your intellect. I would give you you want to know who the smart people are? I know I'll make some people mad. The engineers, that higher level. I loved calculus. You asked me about subjects, but that higher level math. Okay, yeah. So we got to dispel the fact that medicine is about intellect. You have to have intellect, but there are plenty of smart people who don't want to do the other things that are necessary. You have to have patience. You have to persevere. There are folks who just don't want to do that and are honest enough to say, I don't want to do that.
Okay.
I have mad respect for that because now you've saved yourself and somebody else because you did not take that as a personal privilege that I'm just going to go. I can't figure out anything else to do with my life, and I like science, so I'm just going to go to medical school.
So let's get back to you in terms of when that light bulb went off for you. You're an undergrad, and you're getting closer and closer to the point in which you're going to apply to med school. What was your thinking back then that really, affirmed that or confirmed that's where you're going?
Well, I mean, I got through, the intro courses. I was able to, get through the higher level. My GPA was decent. It certainly was not a 4.0. And at that time, you took the MCAT. The MCAT was only given twice a year. And I took it. I certainly didn't have the worst score. I didn't have the best score. And I think, again, so in my limited thinking, I was like, okay, where are the places that I'm going to consider going? Now, if I'm really honest, my confidence level probably had been shaken in some areas, and because there were probably no people. So high school was great. In college, there weren't necessarily anybody in the pre-med office that was like, oh, yes. And I think that's probably why I'm so passionate about when I work with students now, because if I had had someone, and again, when you're at a school like Hopkins that has tons of pre-meds, well, nobody's taking, time to sit with you necessarily. And because there weren't a lot of me around at other places, my school, SNMA, we didn't have maps or any of that stuff that a lot of colleges have now, and they have connections to mentors. We didn't have any of that. So pretty much you had your upper level classmates that, were doing stuff, but everybody's just trying to get out and do their own thing. So there really wasn't anybody to say, hey, or have you thought about this, or apply to this school, or here's a school that, you have a good profile. So you pretty much are figuring it out.
So that's what you had to do.
You're pretty much figuring it out and relating to your other pre-med friends, but there was no me that was around that I could just go to. And so again, I'm at a white school. Now, if I were at a Howard or something, that experience is probably different because there's probably somebody there. And again, my parents are not physicians. We don't have physicians in my family. So there was nobody for me to necessarily go to. So it was really kind of just trial by fire. You figure out some things and so the one person I did have, and so this is really important and key for me, I knew nothing about osteopathic medicine, didn't even know it existed. I have a friend whose father, she's from Michigan, and she lived in the dorm next to me, and her father was a very well-known DO, knew Dr. Anderson, everything in Michigan. And so she's the one that actually came to Hopkins with the intent of going to DO school in Michigan, because she was raised, her father's a DO. So that was my introduction. But once I went to PCOM and I interviewed and I said, hey, this is what medicine is supposed to be as I see it, then I sort of kind of didn't even bother to move forward with some of the other programs. So it was a choice. And so I say that because
Nice.
a lot of times people think it's a default and they said,
Right.
well, you couldn't get into it. And I'm just, well, no. Some people are actually choosing to
Mhm.
go there because the tenants line up with what they think and how medicine is supposed to be practiced.
Absolutely. I hear
Mm-hmm.
this quite often.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the acceptance from PCOM.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I interviewed on Halloween. I remember it like it was yesterday.
yeah,
It was Halloween, October. So I interviewed early, fairly early. That was early. And I knew I was accepted. I think I had my acceptance before Thanksgiving. So I
so
think I
tell
knew.
me. So you go, you get the invite, you go. What is that experience like for you?
Well, because I didn't have anything to compare it to. So I was excited about, just being able to be there.
Awesome.
Didn't know what to expect. I mean, I understood, medical school's 4 years. And da, da, da,
Right.
da. Side note, I applied, or I was going to. So Boston University, I only applied to 3 colleges, but Boston University had a combined undergrad and MD program.
Okay.
And originally I was going to apply to it, and then I thought about it and I said, do I really want to chop off part of my undergrad experience to
Uh-huh.
go to medical school? And I opted not to do it because I was like, no. And I'm glad I didn't,
Mhm.
because there were things that happened in undergrad that I needed to experience. So I just wanted to throw that
I
in as
like
an
that you mentioned
aside.
that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's part of the thinking that I wanted to hear about.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with
Of
combined programs.
course.
I just decided it was not for me.
Right.
And based on some of the things I was able to do. So you asked about, so once I knew I was in, I still had to go to school, but I actually enjoyed senior year,
Mhm.
and particularly second semester, because I had taken coursework over the summer and during our intersession breaks, our winter term. So
Mhm.
I only needed something like 3 credits to graduate. So I could stay full time. I took 12, but I took fun stuff. Like I took writing course, and I don't think I took any science coursework
Mhm.
my second semester. But again, I had done all of my hard stuff and I was graduating. And so it was really nice because I knew medical school was going to be hard and it was going to be a transition. So it was really, really nice to not have anything heavy duty
Yeah.
that I needed to complete and that I had to pass. I mean, I would say I passed everything else, but it was nice not to have any of that second semester senior year. I had no finals. I think I had 1 paper.
Mhm.
And so I was able to volunteer and do other meaningful things
Mhm.
that were helpful transitioning to medical school, but I wasn't so stressed. So when I started medical school, it's kind of like, I
Yeah.
was able to, I
And
still had to work, but
yeah.
I didn't go into it just frenzied. And if I were going to tell students anything, it would be, think about your trajectory.
So now you are in PCOM.
Mhm.
Please, think about, what was that experience walking into that space? How was that for you?
Well, I don't know that I, had any ideas of what to expect. There were very few of us in terms of students of color. And unfortunately, by the time my class graduated, I was the only Black female who got out of my class. I think we
Wow.
started with 4,
Okay.
3 or 4, and I was the only one to get out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a whole nother beast. Now, I will say this. I am not saying medical school was easy,
Right.
but it was easy in the regard that I went to a very intense undergraduate experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so some of that really was good in that it trained me. Now, where it wasn't good was my science tests in undergrad were essays. We had to explain things. There was no multiple choice.
Right.
So when I got to medical school, it was a little difficult because I was not used to multiple choice tests, and I had to really sort of learn how to take a multiple choice test. So that was a little bit of a transition for me
Interesting.
because I was used to being able to bring in other
Yeah.
information, and you can't do that. So sometimes, and again, that's not your intellect, that's just learning how to take a test. So that's what I tell students. So particularly if you had leeway to be able to explain and now you got to do, you might have to do some work to figure out how to take a multiple choice test. But that's not your intellect. That's learning how to take a test and answering what the question is asking and not bringing in extra stuff. Wow. So that was a little bit of a transition, but I graduated. So clearly I figured it out. So yeah, but that was a transition. Absolutely.
Okay. So you're in med school. What would you say was your challenges in med school?
Well, you know what? I tell people this, I was so intent, and, I probably was naive, because now I would be like, yeah, there's probably some people that don't think I should be here. But I think I lived in a space of, just blissful ignorance, as I like to call it, where I was just focused on getting out. And I never experienced anything. I mean, you knew I wasn't being pulled into circles, but people were nice enough. And again, the Black students, so this is where we had an SNMA chapter. As a matter of fact, fun fact, PCOM is the first DO school to have an SNMA chapter. We are the first ones. And so I was the first regional director first DO regional director for Region 8. So SNMA, that's why it is near and dear to me today, because that was a lifeline. So I had friends at Jefferson, and Hahnemann was around at that time and is now Drexel, and Medical College of Pennsylvania and Temple. And as a regional director, I had friends all over. So SNMA took on really big significance for me, just because we had small numbers. Now we have a whole diversity office at PCOM, but at that time, many schools just had a person who was the diversity, and sometimes that person was not a person of color, and fine, we had people who did right by us, but you looked for what you needed. And I was at that point where I was everywhere. I was trying to figure it out. And so I knew I had to keep moving, so I didn't have time to just sit and cry about what wasn't there. I just had to keep it moving. And that's why I said how I really got immersed. I had friends at all of the medical schools. I knew all of the diversity people, and I was active in, with the Medical Society of Eastern Pennsylvania as a student and as a resident. And so that's where those Black doctors that we didn't see, that's where they were. So let
me ask you, so then you go into your clinical years. What was that experience like for you?
It was great for me, because I think I have great personality. I have personality. So clinic for me, people interaction, that was good. And I had my fourth year, you have a lot of elective time. And I knew by this time, I've now figured out that I wanted to do pediatrics after I did my rotation. So fourth year, most of my elective time was spent out at community pediatric clinics all over Philadelphia. And that experience was great, because I was outside of the bubble of PCOM, and I'm now out meeting all of these other people. As a matter of fact, I worked at one of Dr. Walter Lomax's clinics, which was a great experience. And I still talk about that to this day, the people I was able to meet. And again, you now start making connections to some of these other people.
So let me ask you, so making the decision to go pediatrics, what triggered within you that spoke to you to go into that?
Okay, I don't know that I should tell the story, but I'm going to. So originally, I thought I wanted to do OB. And because it had the surgical and it's still primary care. But one night late, I think it was up studying, and young people, I don't even know if they have these anymore, but I don't know if people remember the days of those horrible commercials that lawyers used to put out. They'd come on at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and there was this commercial, and it said, does your child have brain damage? Maybe it's your doctor's fault. And I just remember seeing that commercial and saying, oh no, I'm not going to be that. And I have OB friends who are lovely. And so I was sort of like, oh no. So that was part of it. But the real answer is, after I did my rotation, and this is the importance of encouraging people when you think they've done well. I happened to be walking through Evans Hall, as one of the buildings on campus, and the preceptor for the peds rotation, who now is actually, she became a mentor and a dear, dear friend. She was walking through and she stopped me. And she said, wow, the office thought you did a really, really nice job on peds.
Yeah.
So I laugh, I joke about the OB part, that part of it, but it really was that someone who was doing the work.
Right.
And I tell people there's a personality type for everything.
Right.
So when I really kind of took a step and looked at it, I was like, yeah, this might be my niche. So that's actually what happened. But that horrible commercial, it's still like, it's like, okay.
Oh.
So anyway, so it was someone who saw something and said, and took the time to say it to me. And that's really, so then I started spending all of my elective time doing peds. And I thought about maybe doing a subspecialty for a minute, but then I said no. I said the bread and butter for where I want to be is in general peds.
Okay. I mean, wow. Yeah. The impact.
Yeah.
So
and it's educational. A lot of general peds is you are educating people. So if you like teaching, there's a natural teaching component built into pediatrics. So, so it kind of, and my little goofy personality kind of went with it.
So I believe you're in the middle of a transition now. So, because I normally ask, what does a day in the life look like for you? So I would imagine, I mean, you are doing many, many things. Maybe I'll rephrase it for you to say, what is your ideal role that you would like to see yourself in it now?
That's a good question. And I don't know that I have an answer because I'm still figuring it out. This medical journey and all the things I've done have really kind of set me up because I have done a lot of things. And often in the spaces I am in now, I'm the only person in the room who's practiced. I'm the only person in the room who's taken the MCAT. I'm the only person in the room who's on an admissions committee. And so I'm the only person in the room who's taught, who's done all of those pieces and is bringing all of those pieces together. So I think I'm looking for space where we continue. For as many strides as we've made, we know that some numbers are still not changing. The numbers of Black males in medicine still, not moved much. We're doing better in terms of, making sure that we have equity in terms of, who gets to go to medical school, but still there are fights out there. And so I think that's the space. And then just being there for students who are gifted and can do the work, but there's not necessarily someone to kind of help them navigate some of the road and some of the path, because you don't know it. And even if you have, when I was at my previous job, we had a lot of first gen students, but first gen is defined in a lot of areas, a lot of ways. And so let's just say you do have parents who have college degrees, but they came from another country and they're not used to the medical education system in this country. So I think, I'm still trying to see what's out there. There are post-bac programs, there are so many things. And so I think I'm still trying to figure out where is that sweet spot of this is where I can do the most good. And it might be doing a couple of different things, and not that I'm one voice.
Right.
I don't have all the answers. I'm one voice, but sometimes, and you have to know that not everything will resonate with everybody, but your message will be important for somebody. So I think it's like anything else.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I hope you truly see your value, because, speaking for myself, sitting at the table with deans and doctors and just different professionals, it's very rare that you see someone that has such a varied background that could speak strategically because you're familiar with different spaces, right? I see that in myself as well, and I'm so pleased that I can be able to deliver in such a way, because there are people that have good intentions but don't have the insight or empathy to know how to put things together, and that's where your value is. My God. And
I thank you for that, because again, there are people who would have you believe that that is not of value. You know, we still have people who if you got a 3.9 and a 520 MCAT, they don't care what else you've done. They just think somebody should give you a seat. And when you say to them, no, that person is missing some competencies and they don't know how to treat people. On the other side, you've got somebody with a 505 who's, you know, clawed their way and managed to get a good GPA, and there's still so much work to do. So thank you for that validation, because it's hard. And I tell students all the time, it does not go away just because you're now on the other side. But you have to know that you know that you know that yes, there's going to be some bumps but I can do this. And so you got to, you know, and find those people. We're out here. Now, they may not be sitting in front of you, but they're out there. And so it just becomes one of those things. So that's why I said, even in the midst of figuring out if there is space for me, I'm sure there is. I just have to keep working my way to where that is. So I thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your time. All right. So this ends this episode. And I thank you, Dr. Hendricks, for your time.
Very welcome. Very welcome.
It truly will speak to many. Okay, so this ends this episode, and we'll see you guys again next week.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.